This is a very full Shabbat, not only because we have a musical artist, but because Parshat B'Shalach is filled with things that a rabbi could talk about. First of all, there are songs by women. Miriam in the Torah, Devorah in the Haftorah, so it is a perfect Shabbat to have a woman sing and raise our spirits. There's the part about the crossing the sea, which is not a minor part of the Torah, about the Egyptians drowning, about Shirat HaYam, and yet, as those of you who know me might guess, I'm not going to talk about any of that. I'm going to talk about something else for a second because of what's happening here tomorrow. I'm going to talk about the fact that when Joseph dies at the end of Genesis, he says to the brothers who are gathered around him, "Promise me that you will bring me after the liberation, after the experience back to the land of Israel." And this is what he says, Vayashba Yosef et bnei Yisrael lemor. And Joseph made them promise. And then Moses, when he goes to get Joseph's bones, says, Ki hashpa hishbia et bnei Yisrael. In that change is the whole sermon. First of all, remember that while everybody is looting the Egyptians, I don't want to use the word looting, it seems to, while they are taking the payment for hundreds of years of slavery. Because after all, did it ever occur to you, where did they get the gold to build the golden calf? Well, they got it from the Egyptians. While everyone else is taking that stuff, what is Moses doing? Moses is finding the bones of Joseph. And by the way, as long as we're on the topic, according to the tradition, it was Serach bat Asher, a woman who went down to Egypt and lived all through the slavery and left with the Israelites, that told Moses where Joseph's bones were. But he's preoccupying himself with finding the bones of Joseph, and because it says Hashpeah Hishbia, the rabbis say Joseph didn't just make them promise to bring the bones out, because after all, he was surrounded by his brothers who were going to die long before the Exodus. What he made them promise was that throughout the generations, you will not forget that even though you won't be here anymore, you will make sure that your children and your children's children and your children's children will remember to bring me out of Egypt. And so Moses gets the coffin of Joseph. And I want you to imagine the exodus from Egypt and crossing the desert in a different way from the way we normally imagined. It was also a funeral procession. They were walking behind the coffin of Joseph. The other box that they had in front of them was the box of the covenant, of the Ten Commandments. And the rabbis say when people used to see the Israelites marching through the desert with two boxes, and they would say, what's in those boxes? They would say, the person whose remains lie in this fulfilled the commandments that are enshrined in that. Tomorrow we have the annual brunch to which we invite survivors of the Holocaust. When I began at Sinai Temple, that brunch was filled. But year after year after year, people have disappeared. This week, as some of you know, I did the funeral for Rose Farkas, 97 years old, who saved her brother and her sister, but could not save the rest of her family from being murdered by the Nazis. You know that my position is the Max Webb senior rabbi who died at 103 a few years ago and who managed to escape from many camps with his life. And one after another, they survived the Holocaust, but they cannot survive time. And so what's the promise that they speak to us? Hashpea hishpia. Don't forget, when we're not here, in the years to come, in the generations that follow, don't forget. The Israelites, hundreds of years in slavery, didn't forget Joseph's bones, and Moses remembered the promise and carried them back to Israel. And yet, as a world, we're remembering Nazis only as an ugly epithet that people throw at one another, but not what it really meant to the world and to our people. And soon there will be no coffins to carry. Soon, that brunch will have no survivors. In the lifetime of many people sitting here, there will be no more survivors. So I ask you to recall the promise of Joseph, what he extracted from his brothers and from Jewish history. Do not forget, not just you, but don't let your children forget, your grandchildren forget, your great-grandchildren forget. Memory is a fragile thing, but we as a Jewish people, we have walked through this world with the caskets of our forefathers and foremothers before us. We have known joy, but always kept an eye on sorrow, celebrated life and love, but not forgotten loss. As the world says goodbye, one after another, to the people who were there, let us not forget what they suffered, what they survived, and what they teach. At her funeral, Rose's family told the stories of how she saved her sister and her brother with cunning and bravery and strength. May we have just a bit of that strength to remember who we have been and who we are in our procession across the wilderness to the promised land. Shabbat Shalom.